Hi, I'm Mark Skipper. Welcome to the Kempsville Presbyterian Church technical briefing we put together for January 2020. In this briefing, I'm going to go over some technical notes for AV in this facility. I'll also go over some brief notes for the musicians and some notes about the audio infrastructure. Thanks for joining us. At KPC, starting the technical overview, we want to look at the rooms that are on the KPC campus. The primary room is our main sanctuary, which is right in the middle of the building at the front. In the main sanctuary, there's one stage. There is a single front of house position that is in the upper balcony, centered on the stage, both sound and lights. Technical operation is based from there. And then behind the front of house position in the balcony, there is a video production suite that a technical camera cut can happen for an in-house broadcast, say for a streaming event to Facebook, that sort of thing. Adjacent to the sanctuary are a few other important rooms at KPC. The first one is called the Fellowship Hall. This is just a generic gathering place where we can do a lot of kinds of gatherings. In that room, there are speakers, so a small worship team could play. There's a wireless microphone, and there is a Mac that's set up for projection and music playback. The next important room that's at KPC is called the Celebration Room. It's our choir rehearsal room. In this room, there is a wireless microphone, and there are some speakers. In addition to that, on the other side of the ministry offices, there's a room called the Den. In the Den, it's just a generic kind of an office space. And in there, you could probably put couple dozen people. You could put a small praise and worship practice together in there. There are wireless speakers. There's a wireless mic, speakers, and a small projection system. So the special spaces at KPC. This particular sanctuary, when it was designed to represent acoustic music beautifully, particularly vocal music. Where it tends to be strong in that area, it tends to be a real challenge when it comes to modern praise and worship with electronic music and speakers. So there are two sides to the coin to the special spaces at KPC, and it's the biggest acoustic factor that happens during our gatherings. So it's important that we understand its nature and we respect what it can do and what it can't do. The first thing to look at when you're in the room is to look at the ceiling. It is a beautiful wooden ceiling that's highly ambient. It's parabolic shaped like a big umbrella, and it was designed obviously to deliver sound, beautiful sound all through the room without speakers. It tends to magnify sounds. So whatever is happening, it makes it louder. So if there are good things that are happening, you'll be hearing some of that distributed through the sanctuary. If there are bad things that are happening, it tends to magnify those too. The layout of the space is octagonal, and that tends to create reverb and echo. Now, I don't want to say reverb or echo like it's a bad thing or it's a good thing. We love singing in our bathrooms because they've just got a great sound. And that can be really, really good for voice. If you do loud things, however, in an echoey room, it can be a disadvantage. So you want to know what you're dealing with when it comes to acoustic events in our sanctuary. The walls are made of masonry block, and they go up about 50 feet. So they're very strong, and that will also have a particular kind of a sound, a clear echo because of masonry block. So behind the stage, the walls have been renovated with the facade that you see, and also the stage has been renovated many times over the years. Unfortunately, this is probably the most difficult part of the renovations that have happened in the space because the stage itself is very dark, muddy, and boomy, and the thin drywall that was added to the facade in the back of the stage tends to rattle and tends to make sound very confusing. So really the name of the game at our stage is to not beat on the stage with kick drums, and to not put people up against the walls, because the walls sound terrible behind the stage. And one of the things that you're never going to get around at KPC is the strong reverb time. So it's good for some things, it's bad for other things. So for vocal reproduction, it's wonderful. Voices sitting right on the edge of the stage and the stairs tend to sound beautiful. Choir and orchestra can sound really, really beautiful. As soon as you put a loud event like a snare drum, kick drum, or a loud electric guitar in the room, it can be really uncontrollable and can turn into a negative very quickly. So we've done things like put an acoustic isolation situation around the drums. Unfortunately, it looks like our drummer's in timeout until we come up with some better solutions. That's the best we can do because we love our drummers at KPC and we like them to be a part of what we're doing. We love our guitar players as well, even though they can be a little noisy sometimes. So we're always going to try to do our best to try to keep amplifiers and loud instruments on stage as quiet as possible. So the primary technical overview of the KPC sanctuary is looking at the speakers in the room and the audio console and audio system in the room. Recently, the QSE KLA speakers were chosen. I didn't choose them, but they are an active array system that's scalable. That means that you can have 4, 2, 3, 5 in an array. If you're in the room and you look at it, you'll see a center cluster that has 4 speakers in a scalable array. On the side, on the wings, currently there is only, in January 2020, there's only 1 speaker per wing, but the full spec would be that we have 2. So one of the downsides to that is that we're missing. You can sit in more than a few seats on the wings and actually not hear a speaker right now. So we need more speakers on the wings. We also have 2 fill speakers by QSE. They're active speakers that are on the stage on poles. They're there to augment stage events like choir events with the piano, or if we're doing some other event and we need music playbacks on stage for performers, they can hear through those. The audio console system that we have is by Midas. It's the Behringer Clark Technic family. It's the M32 in January 2020. That's based on Clark Technic's AES-50 IP audio over IP platform. Basically within that ecosystem in the AES-50 protocol, there's upwards of 190 dedicated channels that can transport over 1 Ethernet cable. So currently the way that the system is laid out is that the primary M32 console's up in the balcony in front of house. We have some Cat6 Ethernet that is run down to various positions on the stage where we have AES stage boxes that allow us 32 inputs and multiple analog outputs and digital outputs from underneath the stage. The system itself is essentially a computer system that can be controlled using Wi-Fi protocols. So not only is there a PC that's controlling the console up at front of house, but logging into the Midas Wi-Fi router that's in the sanctuary can give you access to Midas control using Windows apps. There's a Mac app, there's an iOS app for your iPad, and Android apps for your phone as well. This can be helpful for once a front of house operator has gone down to the stage and is no longer up in the balcony and has to make an adjustment. If you have a mobile device with you that's logged in, you could make a quick change from the stage. Getting around on the sanctuary stage to get musicians connected and instruments connected is fun. We have multiple levels of connectivity, but everything is based on what I would call a normal. So we'll discuss that in the next couple of slides. What's the normal vocal setup, the normal praise and worship band setup, the normal orchestra and choir setup. Normal meaning that all of your creative ideas or your ensemble's musical ideas that are a little different than usual should be adapted to fit within the paradigms that we're going to discuss. This way, your volunteer sound people and expanding media team can have everything filtered down to places that they expect, and so we don't miss cues and we have nice services without surprises. Primarily on stage, there is a stage snake, which is a 24 by 4. That means it's got 24 inputs and it's wired for 4 returns. The 24 inputs, normal, as I'm noted here in the slide, to the first 24 inputs on the primary stage box, Midas stage box. That's connected AES50 to the console up in the balcony. The first 24 inputs is clarified in an Excel spreadsheet that I've developed with inputs and outputs and lots of detailed information about getting in and getting out of the system. Next to the primary stage box, which is upstage and on the left side of the stage, typically in the area where closer to the drums. In that same area, we have built a cross-patch box. The outputs of all of the distributed floor boxes that are around the stage, on the walls, in the front, upstage and downstage, all come to this cross-patch box. So if instead of home running a cable all the way across the stage and creating a trip hazard and having a messy wire situation on the stage, you can patch into these floor boxes. Those outputs will come up to the cross-patch box, and you can use a short XLR patch cable to go from the cross-patch box into the snake box. Background vocal mics, the 5 that I'm going to be discussing in the next slide, have a dedicated floor pocket right in the middle of the stage that home runs directly to the stage box. So that's not designed to be patched or changed at the last minute, because a lot of our services are based on this in a never-changing situation. So that background vocal mics, all 5 of the colors are in this stage box, plus an Aviom drop to add a musician monitor console at that position too. On stage right of the stage, there is a wireless or RF rack that is housing infrastructure for our wireless microphones and some other bits and bobs, antenna systems, antenna distros, and also a short stage box. So that's stage box snake cable takes all the outputs from the wireless rack and routes it underneath the stage to the Midas stage box that's underneath the stage. So looking at the musician technical standards, we want everybody to understand is part of what we're trying to do, not only as a worship team, an orchestra, and worship leaders, and also the technical worship leaders at our church. We would like to have a stability and a reliability in our system. So we do things to a particular standard that meets most of the needs that happen at KPC and allow for volunteers to come in and sit on the console and get things as expected. And musicians can show up, and for a regular rehearsal and not spend a lot of time reinventing the wheel as far as which microphones go where and that sort of thing. So let's go over some of these standards. In the praise and worship band, there's one wireless microphone that's dedicated to the worship leader. This one shows up on the Aviom system so that it's separately addressable by the worship leader and everybody else in the band. This is an important feature. There's another 5 background vocal mics that are available in addition to the wireless worship leader microphone, and all of the mic elements match. So this is an important component for an important aspect for your sound operator. The microphones all match. And so the only difference that would happen in the room or during the worship set is based on an individual's performance, whether they're singing louder or too quietly, or they're not projecting or holding their microphone well. We also have the ability to use the acoustic piano on stage, which is a beautiful, beautiful Baldwin piano. It has a pickup inside. We also have the ability to use electronic keyboards and stereo. We also have the space for 3 guitars, plus an additional instrument like a violin or saxophone, etc. On stage, there are Aviom mixes available for all of the musicians so that they can just throw a set of headphones on, plug in, and dial up any variation of the multi-channel Aviom console to listen to individual items and submixes of various aspects of the band. In the choir and orchestra setup, we have 2 stereo choir microphones that are stereo. So in one position, they're covering both left and right. So we are able to put up a small complement of microphones and yet get a very big sound. I'm particularly fond of these mics. They sound terrific. We also have 4 matching orchestra microphones to distribute as needed with orchestra, typically violin, viola, cello, bass, or violin, cellos, winds, and percussion. We've used them in a lot of different ways. Because they're all matching and they're all outstanding quality microphones, it's a great bass and a flexible bass to work with in many different ways on the orchestra. We also have a pair of QSE active speakers on stage on stands so that we're able to reinforce the sound of the piano through those speakers for the choir so that we can keep the lid down on the piano and distribute evenly piano sound when they're trying to get their pitch and their reference. Part of having a good experience as a musician is knowing what to expect as it comes to vocals. I was always taught, not only as a musician, but as an engineer, that the voice was king. And so there's a real bias towards vocal reproduction at KPC. There are 3 wireless microphones. The very first one is called the Host. It is a black finished microphone, and it is specifically for someone who is in the host position during a meeting to address everybody in the meeting, and it has a special kind of a diaphragm to it that will allow a lot of wandering through the sanctuary with very little fuss. The second wireless microphone we've already discussed is the leader's wireless microphone. It is a matching element to all of the background vocal mics, so it's specifically for worship. It also has a specific spot that shows up in the Aviom so that the worship leader and the rest of the band can isolate that microphone for strong leadership. The last wireless microphone that we have is called the Preach mic. It's a head-worn microphone for whoever's addressing everybody from the pulpit. That comes with a belt pack. Additionally, there are 5 background vocal microphones that are wired. They're known as green, yellow, red, blue, and white. They all have the same characteristics. They all sound the same. They all work the same. There isn't one that's better than another, and this makes for an ease of technical mixing of the show, of the service for your sound operators. The white microphone, be advised, has a double-length cable on it, so if you have a remote position on the stage for narrations or for remote singing, the white microphone is particularly helpful. We've also suspended a microphone in the baptism. It is not permanently patched into the system, but it does show up in the cross-patch area. So for the times that we need support in the baptismal before the service, we can patch the baptism mic sometimes into the 4th orchestra position. Ends up working out really well. So we love our praise and worship bands at KPC, and we're not exclusive to regular folks that play in the band every week. We love to have guests fill in, and we want to have as open a stage as possible for folks that would like to be a part of praise and worship at KPC. So thus we have some standards, and here are some of the briefings of what are considered normal at KPC. We can host 3 guitars at the same time on the stage during a normal praise and worship set. An A-git or acoustic guitar will plug directly into a direct box. We have an E-git or an electric guitar that will go directly into a direct box as well. There's a lot of different ways that can be interfaced. That could be a microphone on an amplifier, that could be an output of a guitar, it could be the output of a pedal board as well. The last guitar that we can host at the same time is our electric basses, or E-bass, and the bass player can plug right into the direct box. Out of the direct box they can go into the amplifier if for some reason they'd like to use the amp. We can also host stereo keyboards. We have some special stereo direct boxes to accommodate stereo sources. So stereo keyboards are definitely one of the things that we use on a regular basis. It's a normal setup. We also have a pickup in our Baldwin grand piano. That's a mono pickup interface. It's not a microphone, so it's not subject to hearing all the normal racket that you would hear with a microphone inside a pickup while the drums are going. We also have a drum enclosure with a very nice Japanese Tama drum kit that we try to keep in good shape. It's all mic'd up, and so you should be able to just kind of hop in there as a player, make a few adjustments, and be off to the races. There is a drum submix that shows up in the Aviom, so you'll be able to hear the current blend of microphones. And there's a backup snare in there just in case you have trouble with the primary snare. In addition to that, you as a worship leader or band leader, you may want to offer a click track or playback for the band that doesn't normally go through the house. And that is not, there is room for that in the system. We would use a special direct box for that. And when we adhere to all these normal inputs, all of these are available in the Aviom with no preparation. Choir and orchestra at KPC for praise and worship services is an important part of who we are, and we will accommodate the largest ensembles that we see on the stage will happen during choir and orchestra times. Very important to us is representing the size and the scale of the choir and orchestra together. Typically that's with the piano as well, and sometimes can even include drums and other instruments. So we really find ourselves at maximum capabilities, at the maximum of our capabilities when we're doing choir and orchestra. Particularly going from praise and worship to choir and orchestra, we are completely at our maximum capabilities. So the setup is actually reasonably simple for choir and orchestra. There are 2 stereo shotgun microphones that have been carefully selected to reject the room and focus and really pull the sound out of the choir in a stereo perspective. So 2 of these on splitting the choir in thirds really sounds excellent. We also have 4 matching orchestra microphones. They can be used in a lot of different configurations. A typical configuration would be violin, viola, cello, or bass. We've used it many times on violins, cellos, winds, and percussion. We also have speakers on stage to support things like piano and other instruments that won't feed back for choir support. So getting pitch and rhythm reference from the piano in the stage fills is a pretty common request. It's not a good idea to put pastor microphones and other acoustic microphones in the fill speakers, as they'll feed back like crazy. And that's a real challenge for the choir and orchestra because the acoustics on the back upstage where the choir and orchestra typically sit are not particularly good, so it's hard to hear up there. In addition to support for the piano on stage for pitch and reference, we also have Aviom support for the drummer. So if there is a drummer playing along, they can listen to the orchestra channel on the Aviom and hear what the orchestra is doing. So that's the current overview at KPC in January 2020. This, in the time that my wife and I have been here for the last 15 years, we've found that Kempsville Presbyterian Church here in Virginia Beach is a creative and a surprising body of people with a wide variety of musical expressions and other expressions, frankly, that are special. They reach into the history of our church, and they also represent what's happening that's new in the American and global church. Technically at KPC, we have limits. We can't do everything. But the truth is that's a status that happens just about everywhere. It's important for musicians and other folks that are coming onto the stage with ideas to understand what limits are and where the normal technical plug-in areas are, so that they can have a good experience sharing what's on their hearts. When techs and creative people work together, we can have a reliable and a pleasant sounding experience for our gatherings, where we're not discussing technical failures afterwards, but rather what's happening in the life of our church. And an important thing to remember is whatever we can't do technically can always be addressed with creative solutions by leaders on stage. It's more important to have heavier preparation and thoughtfulness for a simple event than having simple preparations that are not very well thought out and are much more about the convenience of whoever's throwing out the orders. That creates a very complicated and challenging environment for a technician to work in. If we have a challenging, dangerous, risky situation for techs, then we tend to chase away volunteers. We tend to also chase away people that are developing in their gifts possibly to be technical worship leaders. So it's an important role of mentorship and gathering, not just for a worship event or a gathering for a moment, but the way that we do it will inform how we go forward as a church and how we grow. So thanks for paying attention to this overview. I have created a multiple slide Excel spreadsheet that clarifies inputs and outputs of the Midas system, the speakers, the Aviom, and other notes as well. So if you would like to see that, please just contact the media supervisor here at KPC, and God bless you. Thanks for listening.